What if I told you that a truly beautiful garden does not require hours of weekly labor, just one smart planting decision? Most people have no idea that the right perennials do not just come back every year. They get better, fuller, and more spectacular all on their own. Welcome to Evergreen Garden. Today we are covering 15 perennials that return year after year, grow stronger on their own, and ask almost nothing in return for the color and beauty they bring to your yard. Hit subscribe and let us get into it. 1. Salvia, Salvia nemorosa. If you want a perennial that blooms hard in spring, takes a short rest, and then blooms again in late summer, salvia belongs in your garden. The upright spikes of violet blue, rose pink, or white flowers rise above aromatic foliage and attract hummingbirds and butterflies from the moment they open. Salvia makes a garden look professionally designed without requiring a professional's attention. Salvia has been a cornerstone of European and American herbal gardens for centuries. The name comes from the Latin salvare, meaning to heal. Native to Central Europe and Western Asia, Salvia nemorosa entered formal cultivation by the 17th century and reached American gardens through the English cottage garden tradition that gained enormous momentum in the late 1800s. Modern cultivars far outperform the original species. Caradonna, with its dark stems and deep violet flowers, consistently tops garden trials across the country. Maynite received the Perennial Plant of the Year award in 1997 and still delivers one of the most intense spring displays available. Research from ornamental horticulture programs confirms that perennial salvias rank among the most pollinator-friendly plants available, supporting native bees, bumblebees, and hummingbirds across a double blooming season. Plant salvia in full sun and well-drained soil in USDA plant hardiness zones 4 through 8. After the first bloom flush fades, shear the plant back by about 1/3 to trigger a second wave of flowers within a few weeks. Divide clumps every 3 to 4 years in spring. Salvia is deer-resistant, drought-tolerant once established, and nearly trouble-free in the right conditions. 2. Astilbe. There is a perennial that transforms deep shade and moist soil into an opportunity for spectacular color. Astilbe produces feathery plumes in red, pink, lavender, white, and salmon that rise above ferny foliage from late spring through mid-summer, lighting up spots under trees and along water features where very little else will bloom. Once planted in the right place, it rewards you handsomely with almost no attention for years. Astilbe is native to moist woodlands and stream banks in Asia and North America. Specimens from China and Japan, collected by Western botanists in the 19th century, made their way into European horticulture and then into American gardens. The German breeding firm Ahrens developed many of the most important cultivars in the early 20th century, and those Ahrens hybrids remain foundational to American Astilbe gardens. Contemporary breeding has expanded the range to include miniature varieties for containers and cultivars with long-lasting dried seed heads that provide winter interest. University Extension shade horticulture programs consistently recommend Astilbe as one of the most effective solutions for difficult, moist shade, particularly across the mid-Atlantic and northeastern United States. Plant Astilbe in part to full shade in consistently moist, rich soil in USDA zones 4 through 9. Consistent moisture is the one requirement that matters most. Divide every 3 to 4 years in early spring to maintain flowering vigor, and share starts with other shady spots in the garden. 3. Baptisia, false indigo. If there is one deeply underused native perennial that deserves a permanent place in every American garden, it is baptisia. The blue-purple, pea-like flowers bloom on tall stems in late spring, and after the blooms fade, striking inflated seed pods take over through fall and winter. The plant forms a large, shrub-like clump over time and requires zero care once established, typically taking 2 to 3 seasons to fully settle in. Baptisia australis is native to the eastern and central United States, growing in woodlands, meadows, and along stream banks from Texas through the Great Plains to the Atlantic coast. Native Americans used it medicinally and as a source of blue dye. It entered formal cultivation by the 18th century, became a fixture of colonial gardens, fell out of fashion for imported plants, and was rediscovered during the native plant movement of the late 20th century. Research from the Xerces Society and University Native Plant Programs consistently ranks baptisia among the top perennials for wildlife support, noting its contribution to native bees, butterflies, and other pollinators. Its deep taproot makes it extraordinarily drought-tolerant once established, though that same taproot means it does not tolerate being moved after planting. Give baptisia full sun to light shade in any well-drained soil in USDA zones 3 through 9. Allow it room, as mature plants reach 4 feet tall and wide. Do not fertilize and do not crowd it. In return, baptisia asks nothing for decades and grows more impressive each year it stays in place. 4. Lavender. There is almost nothing in the garden world that combines beauty, fragrance, culinary use, and low-maintenance performance as completely as lavender. The silvery foliage is attractive even out of bloom. The purple flower spikes draw every bee and butterfly in the neighborhood, and dried flowers retain fragrance for months indoors. Lavender is the perennial that keeps giving long after the growing season ends. Lavender has been cultivated in the Mediterranean for at least 2,500 years. The Romans used it to scent their baths, the origin of the name from the Latin lavare, to wash. Monks brought it north into English monastery gardens during the medieval period, and it arrived in American colonies with European settlers. The lavender belt regions of Oregon, Washington, and Michigan now produce lavender commercially, making it one of the most economically significant perennial herbs grown in the country. The cultivar Phenomenal, introduced in 2012, has been a turning point for colder American climates. It is dramatically more cold-hardy and heat-tolerant than traditional English lavender, performing reliably in conditions that would kill older varieties. Research from the University of Minnesota and other cold climate programs has significantly extended lavender's range, making it a realistic perennial for Zone 5 gardens. Plant lavender in full sun and very well-drained, lean soil in USDA zones 5 through 9. Poor drainage is the primary killer of lavender in American gardens, so raised beds are ideal if your soil holds water. After flowering, trim back by about 1/3, cutting into green wood, but never into the old woody base. This one step keeps lavender tidy for years. 5. Bee balm, Monarda. Long before honeybees arrived with European settlers, native bees, bumblebees, hummingbirds, and sphinx moths were drawn to bee balm growing wild across North America. The shaggy, crown-like flowers in red, pink, lavender, and white bloom from midsummer through fall, drawing wildlife from every direction. Beyond its ornamental appeal, bee balm carries one of the richest medicinal and culinary histories of any American native perennial. Monarda didyma is native to eastern woodlands from Georgia north through Canada. The Oswego tribe used it so extensively as a tea plant that early colonists adopted it as Oswego tea. After the Boston Tea Party in 1773, bee balm became a patriotic substitute for British tea and saw widespread use in colonial households before entering English cottage gardens in the 19th century. Modern breeders have focused heavily on mildew resistance. Cultivars including Jacob Klein, the Grand Parade series, and the Balmy series are significantly more resistant to powdery mildew than older varieties, making bee balm a far more reliable garden plant than a generation ago. Research from the National Wildlife Federation consistently lists bee balm among the top 10 plants for attracting hummingbirds and pollinators. Plant bee balm in full sun to part shade, in average to moist soil, in USDA zones 4 through 9. It spreads by underground runners, so divide every 2 to 3 years in spring to contain it and keep the center vigorous. Choose mildew-resistant varieties and allow good air circulation to minimize disease pressure. 6. Feather reed grass, Calamagrostis. When it comes to structural plants that look good in every season and require almost no maintenance, feather reed grass stands nearly alone. The Karl Foerster variety forms a tight, upright column that moves beautifully in a breeze, catches winter light in a way that makes a garden look alive on the coldest January morning, and stays tidy even under 2 feet of snow. It is the plant that makes people stop and ask what it is. Calamagrostis is native across a broad swath of the Northern Hemisphere. Karl Foerster, working at his nursery in Potsdam in the early 20th century, was one of the key figures in bringing ornamental grasses into European and eventually American garden design. His selection became so successful that in 2001, Karl Foerster grass became the first grass to win the Perennial Plant of the Year award, reflecting its exceptional performance and its influence on American border planting. Research from ornamental horticulture programs confirms this grass as one of the most adaptable perennials available, tolerating clay soil, part shade, wet conditions, and urban pollution levels that would stress most flowering perennials. Its fall and winter seed heads provide structure and food for seed-eating birds like goldfinches and juncos throughout the cold months. Plant Karl Foerster in full sun to part shade in average soil in USDA zones 4 through 9. Cut it back to within 6 inches of the ground in late winter before new growth emerges, which is the one annual step this grass requires. Beyond that cut, it is entirely self-sufficient and grows more impressive every year. 7. Garden phlox, Phlox paniculata. There is a moment in mid to late summer when garden phlox fills the air with a sweet, spicy fragrance that is one of the most distinctive scents of the American summer garden. The large domed flower clusters in white, pink, magenta, lavender, and bicolor combinations rise to 4 feet tall and create a back-of-border display that few other summer perennials can match. When you choose the right variety, garden phlox is one of the most rewarding perennials in the country. Phlox paniculata is native to eastern and central woodlands and meadows of the United States. Native Americans used it medicinally, and early American naturalists brought it into cultivation in the 18th century. It traveled to European gardens, where English and French breeders developed many classic varieties, and by the Victorian era, it was a standard fixture of American cottage gardens. Contemporary breeding has dramatically improved mildew resistance. The white-flowered David received the Perennial Plant of the Year award in 2002, and Robert Poor, with its intense magenta color, remains a consistent top performer. Research from state agricultural experiment stations confirms that good air circulation and avoiding overhead watering reduce mildew pressure significantly. Plant garden phlox in full sun and moist, well-drained, fertile soil in USDA zones 4 through 8. Space plants generously to allow air circulation. Divide every 2 to 3 years in spring to maintain vigor. Deadhead spent flower heads promptly to encourage rebloom and to prevent self-seeding, which produces weaker off-color plants. 8. Blazing star, liatris. Most flowers open from the bottom of a stem upward. Liatris does the opposite, blooming from the top down in a way that creates a unique, dynamic effect and extends peak interest for weeks rather than days. The tall, narrow spikes of rosy purple flowers are stunning in the border and exceptional as cut flowers. Liatris is also one of the most important monarch butterfly plants you can grow, and planting it is a genuine contribution to a species under significant pressure. Liatris spicata is native to moist meadows and prairies across the eastern and central United States. Native Americans use the roots medicinally and as a flavoring agent. Early naturalists documented it extensively, and it entered cultivation in European botanical gardens in the 18th century. Its unusual top-down flowering and striking color made it a novelty that breeders began improving, and named cultivars appeared in American nurseries through the early 20th century. Research from the Xerces Society and University Prairie Restoration programs consistently identifies liatris as a critical late-summer nectar source for monarchs on their southern migration, and one of the top plants for supporting native bumblebees at the end of the season. The compact cobalt variety grows to about 18 inches and performs reliably across a wide range of American climates. Plant blazing star in full sun and well-drained to dry soil in USDA zones 3 through 9. It grows from corms and is drought-tolerant once established. Plant corms in spring with the flat side down, 3 to 4 inches deep. Leave spent spikes standing for birds that feed on the seeds. This plant genuinely takes care of itself once settled. 9. Agastache, Anise hyssop. Agastache fills the gap between traditional cottage garden perennials and the drought-tolerant prairie plants that define modern American garden design. The bottlebrush flower spikes in orange, pink, blue, and lavender bloom from midsummer straight through frost. The foliage smells of licorice when touched, and the plant handles dry, hot conditions with composure that most other summer perennials cannot match. It is also one of the most consistently recommended plants by professional pollinator specialists. Agastache funiculum, the native anise hyssop, grows wild in dry prairies and open woodlands across the northern and central United States. Native Americans used it as a tea plant, a food flavoring, and ceremonial medicine. Early European settlers adopted it for both culinary and ornamental purposes, and it has maintained a presence in American gardens since the 17th century. Modern hybrid varieties combine the drought tolerance of southwestern species with the cold hardiness of northern natives. Blue Fortune delivers one of the best combinations of fragrance, flower color, and season-long performance of any summer perennial. Research from pollinator programs consistently documents agastache as one of the highest value nectar plants available, with a long season supporting early bees, late butterflies, and hummingbirds through hard frost. Plant agastache in full sun and well-drained to dry soil in USDA zones 4 through 9. It dislikes wet soil, especially in winter. Do not divide it frequently, as it performs best when left undisturbed. Allow light self-seeding to naturalize it gradually, and cut back old stems in early spring before new growth begins. 10. Helenium, sneezeweed. The name sneezeweed is deeply unfair to one of the showiest, most reliably blooming late summer perennials available. The common name comes from the historic use of dried flowers in making snuff, not from any allergenic property. Helenium deserves to be judged on its garden performance alone. The daisy-like flowers in mahogany red, orange, copper, and yellow bloom from late summer through fall, filling the border with warm color at precisely the moment when most other perennials are winding down. Helenium autumnale is native to wet meadows and stream banks across most of North America. Native Americans used it medicinally to treat colds, headaches, and fevers. It was among the first American native plants exported to European botanical gardens in the 17th century, and German and Dutch breeders developed the spectacular modern cultivars now sold in American nurseries, under names like Moorheim Beauty and Mardi Gras. Research from university perennial trial programs has confirmed helenium as a top-performing late-season pollinator plant, with studies documenting over 40 bee species visiting it in a single season. Its pollen is particularly valuable to native bumblebees building up food stores in late summer and early fall, making it one of the most ecologically important fall-blooming perennials in the American garden. Plant helenium in full sun and consistently moist to average soil in USDA zones 3 through 8. Divide every 2 to 3 years in spring to prevent the center from dying out. Pinch stems back by 1/3 in late spring to create bushier, more self-supporting plants that do not need staking when in bloom. 11. Amsonia, blue star. Most perennials offer one season of interest. Amsonia offers 3. The light sky blue star-shaped flowers bloom in spring for 3 to 4 weeks. In summer, the fine willow-like foliage forms a tidy, attractive mound of deep green. Then, in fall, the entire plant turns a brilliant, clear yellow that rivals any shrub or grass for autumn impact. For 3 genuine seasons of garden presence from a single plant that divides only occasionally, Amsonia has almost no competition. Amsonia tabernamontana is native to stream banks and open woodlands across the central and eastern United States. It was named for the 16th century German botanist Jacobus tabernamontanus and entered cultivation through direct observation of its native habitat. It attracted renewed attention during the American native plant movement as gardeners rediscovered its remarkable autumn color, which had been largely overlooked by earlier generations. Garden designers, including Pete Udolph, have championed Amsonia as one of the most underused perennials in American gardens. The threadleaf species Amsonia hubrichti, native to Arkansas, has been named among the top 5 fall color perennials available anywhere in the world. Research confirms it is nearly trouble-free, resistant to deer, drought, and most pests and diseases once established. Plant amsonia in full sun to part shade in average to moist, well-drained soil in USDA zones 3 through 9. Shear it back by 1/3 immediately after flowering to prevent midsummer flopping. Beyond that step, it requires almost no care, and division every 5 or more years is all it needs to stay vigorous. 12. Epimedium, barrenwort. If you have dry shade, the kind of difficult spot under a large spruce or along the north side of a building where nothing seems to survive, epimedium is the answer. This overlooked perennial handles conditions that would kill hostas, collapse astilbe, and push most shade plants to the edge of survival. Once established, it spreads slowly into a weed-suppressing mat and is one of the most self-sufficient plants in the entire gardening world. Epimedium species are native to China, Japan, Korea, and the Mediterranean, with the greatest diversity found in China. Traditional Chinese medicine used it extensively, and it has attracted significant pharmaceutical research interest in recent decades. Western botanists exploring China in the 19th century brought specimens to Europe, and American garden interest grew significantly when plantsman Dan Hinckley began championing Chinese species in the 1990s, sparking a wave of new introductions that transformed how gardeners understand this genus. Modern cultivation has been expanded by dozens of new Chinese species and hybrids, with foliage ranging from deep green through bronze, burgundy, and marbled silver, and flowers spanning yellow, white, pink, red, and purple. Research confirms that established epimedium is among the most drought-tolerant shade perennials available, spreading gradually to crowd out weeds and requiring minimal care. Plant epimedium in part to full shade in dry to average well-drained soil in USDA zones 4 through 9. Cut the old foliage back to the ground in late winter to show off the spring flowers. Give it a year or two to settle in, then leave it alone. Once established, it is close to indestructible. 13. Bleeding heart, Dicentra spectabilis. There is a perennial that produces perfect, heart-shaped flowers dangling from arching stems like a string of jewelry in motion, blooms for weeks in mid-spring, then politely goes dormant for summer, making room for later blooming companions. That self-effacing elegance, combined with a performance that has charmed American gardeners for 150 years, makes Bleeding Heart one of the most beloved spring perennials in cultivation, delivering extraordinary returns for very little ongoing effort. Dicentra spectabilis is native to northern China, Korea, and Siberia. Scottish plant collector Robert Fortune introduced it to Western horticulture in 1846. Within years, it became enormously popular and spread quickly to American gardens, finding ideal conditions in the cool, moist springs of the Northeast and Pacific Northwest. By the late Victorian era, it was a standard fixture of American cottage and shade gardens. The Gold Heart variety, with golden yellow foliage contrasting dramatically with pink and white flowers, has been a bestseller since the 1990s. King of Hearts, a more compact hybrid, stays in leaf longer through summer, addressing the one limitation of classic Bleeding Heart. Research from shade garden programs confirms it as an excellent companion for hostas, astilbe, and ferns, which fill in the gaps left when Bleeding Heart goes dormant in summer heat. Plant Bleeding Heart in part shade, in moist, rich, well-drained soil in USDA zones 3 through 9. Mulch generously to retain moisture and keep the soil cool. Do not cut back the foliage until it has yellowed naturally, as the plant needs that time to store energy for next year's display. 14. Penstemon, beard tongue. Hummingbirds are drawn to penstemon with an urgency that makes clear this relationship has been going on for millions of years. The tubular flowers in red, pink, purple, lavender, and white are among the most perfectly designed hummingbird plants in the North American native repertoire. Beyond their wildlife appeal, penstemons are strikingly beautiful, deer-resistant perennials that belong in far more American gardens than they currently occupy. Penstemon is one of the largest plant genera native to North America, with over 250 species found from Alaska to the Sonoran Desert. Native Americans used it medicinally across a remarkable geographic range, and it was one of the earliest North American wildflowers to attract European collectors in the 18th century. being cultivated in European gardens before the American Revolution. Modern breeding has produced cultivars combining the drought tolerance and deer resistance of native species with spectacular colors and longer bloom seasons. Husker Red, which received the Perennial Plant of the Year award in 1996, features maroon red foliage alongside white flowers flushed with pink. Research confirms penstemon as one of the most effective plants for supporting native bees, with over 60 species documented visiting its flowers in studies from Western university programs. Plant penstemon in full sun and excellent drainage in USDA zones 4 through 9. In loose, well-drained soil, even poor and rocky ground, it thrives. In heavy clay or waterlogged soil, it will decline. Deadhead spent stems to encourage rebloom, and cut plants back by 1/3 after the main bloom. Avoid excess fertilization, which produces lush but floppy growth. 15. Brunnera, Siberian bugloss. I have saved one of the most stunning foliage perennials for last. Brunnera produces tiny, forget-me-not blue flowers in early spring, but the real story is the foliage. The heart-shaped leaves of modern Brunnera varieties are so spectacularly variegated, some appearing almost completely silver with only a narrow green border, that the plant reads as a light source in a dark shade garden. Where brightness is hard to come by, Brunnera solves the problem beautifully all season long. Brunnera macrophylla is native to moist woodland clearings in the Caucasus Mountains and western Siberia. For most of its garden history, the plain, green-leafed species was the common form grown in American and European gardens. The introduction of lang trees in the late 20th century, followed by Jack Frost in the early 2000s, changed everything. Jack Frost won the Perennial Plant of the Year award in 2012, sparking a wave of new selections that transformed how American gardeners approach shade plant design. Research from shade horticulture programs confirms Brunnera as one of the most reliable and long-lived shade perennials available, with well-established plants persisting in the same location for decades without requiring division. Its early spring bloom fills a critical gap, providing nectar for early emerging bees before most other shade plants have broken the soil surface after winter dormancy. Plant Brunnera in part to full shade in moist, well-drained soil rich in organic matter in USDA zones 3 through 7. It will show leaf scorch in dry conditions or too much direct sun. Mulch generously to conserve moisture through summer. Divide every 4 to 5 years if you want to create more plants, but otherwise, Brunnera asks almost nothing beyond consistent moisture and shade. And there you have it, 15 perennials that come back every year, grow more beautiful with each passing season, and ask almost nothing in return. From the fragrant spikes of lavender and the hummingbird-packed flowers of penstemon, to the 3-season wonder of amsonia and the shade-brightening magic of Brunnera, these plants prove that a beautiful garden and a low-effort garden are the same garden if you choose the right plants. Give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment telling us which perennial you are adding, and subscribe to Evergreen Garden for more gardening ideas every week. We will see you in the next one.